Good morning. Hi, so this is Prasad, and I work with Cisco TAC, part of security team. I handle the FirePOWER devices. So on this session today, we'll be discussing about backup and restore, policy import, export, and migration to FTD. So I'll be George, my colleague, also will be joining us on this session, later part of the session. So let's start with the backup and restore. Backup and restore is a very essential part in a system maintenance plan. So in case if there's a disaster or there's a problem where you need to replace the device, or there's a DP corruption, the backup information is going to help us to restore the configuration and events on the device. So this is really going to help us in case if there's any kind of problem impacting the complete system. So to let's take a look on the backup part and what things we need to be aware before performing a backup, and what are the things that we need to be aware of, and what are the supported information on the backup that we capture. So the very first thing is backup is not going to take a hold or take a backup of the software. It's going to have only archives of the configuration and events on the device. So what we mean by this is, like, say for example, if you're running on a version like 6.2.0.2 for example, and when we take a backup of it, it's going to only archive the configuration and the events from that particular software. It's not going to back up the software itself. So in case if we need to replace the particular backup, we need to restore the system first to a respective version where the backup was taken, say 6.2.0.2 on the right VDB SIU, and then we'll have to restore the information. And again, to understand what are the devices that supports backup and restore. At the moment, we support backup and restore on all FMCs, both virtual and physical. And on sensors, we support backup and restore only on 7000 and 8000 series FirePOWER sensors. So other sensors like the ASA SFR module, or the virtual FTDs or physical FTDs, or the virtual NGFW device. So on these devices, the backup and restore option is not supported. And again, so this backup and restore option should only be used to restore a system where there's a failure, or to correct the missing configurations. But in case if you want to copy the information to another appliance, say that you have to deploy on different sites, and you have to deploy similar configuration on different sites, we will not be able to, we should not use the backup and restore as an option for that. But instead, you can use policy import export, where you can export the required policies and then import it to a different device. Again, we need the software to be the same, but you will be able to export and import on different devices. So we'll be looking at policy import and exports in detail further on the session. So as explained earlier, for a backup and restore, we need to ensure that system is the target system that we are trying to restore it to should be running the same version. It should be the same device model. It should be running the same VDB version and the SRU, which is the rule updates. So during a backup, any private keys associated with PK objects are going to be decrypted before they are going to be added to the backup archive. So on a backup archive, the private keys are stored in unencrypted. So we need to ensure that we store the backup files securely. And during a backup, any interface zone associations that are performed are not going to be backed up. The information are not going to be backed up. So any device you're going to restore to, the zone mapping needs to be manually done on the device. They'll not be the information is not taken during a backup, and we need to do that manually. And in case domain management is enabled on the device, the backup and restore option is only available under global domain. Any of the child or leaf domains, you do not have a backup restore option. Only on global domain you will have the backup restore option available. So this table explains on different backup types and what are the type of data that we'll be able to backup. And again, one information to note here is that the system, when you're performing a backup, the captured file information the device takes is not backed up during a backup process. And as you can see here, the data is classified into three things. One is the configuration data, event data, and unified files. So the unified files are something that are present only on the sensors. These are basically unprocessed events before the events are being sent to the FMC. So this information is only available on the sensors, and we will be able to back up this information only when we take a backup of the sensors from the FMC. As you can see, when we perform a backup on FMC, we will be able to take or we have an option to choose configuration data and event data, but not unified files, because the unified files are only available on the sensor. And when we perform a backup on the sensors, we have two options: either to perform the backup from the FMC for the managed devices, or we can perform a backup directly from the sensor GUI. As you should be aware that the 7000 and 8000 appliances, the hardware appliances, have their own sensor GUI, which has limited functionality, but that we do provide backup and restore as part of that. So when these appliances are restored from the sensor GUI itself, then the only option available for us is to only take out the configuration data. Both event and unified files are not available as an option. But for the same 7000 and 8000 series appliances, when you perform a backup from the FirePOWER Management Center, we have option to gather configuration data and the unified files. The event data is not available because the events are processed unified files which are part of the FMC that are not available on the sensor. So now let's look at backing up FirePOWER Management Center. So before performing or initiating a backup, we need to be aware that we would need enough disk space before this, because depending on the amount of data stored on the system, it's going to consume a lot of memory. So we need to ensure that we need ample space before initializing a backup. So to initialize a backup for a FirePOWER Management Center on the GUI, you need to navigate to System, Tools, Backup and Restore, which will land you on the page which is similar to what's shown here. And we need to choose FirePOWER Management Backup. So once we click on FirePOWER Management Backup, it's going to take us to a page where we can create the profile to backup or to define what we need to backup on this. So when you create a profile, the first thing we need to define the name for the specific profile. And as you can see here, the storage location here is local. We're not configured any remote storage. So the storage location is marked what is on the device, which is var SF backup. So all your backups that are performed locally is going to be stored on that particular system under var SF backup. So now you have the option to choose from either to choose configuration only or events only, or choose both configuration and events. So as you know, the backup, depending on the available configuration, it's going to take some time. So if you want to be notified once the backup is complete, you can configure this option, email when complete, and then define your email address here. So once the backup process is going to complete, it's going to notify you by a mail so that you are aware once the process gets over. So once you have configure these options, you can initialize a backup on demand by clicking Start Backup. So this is going to immediately initialize the backup process, or you can click Save as New to save this profile so that you can use it for future backup process. So we just saw how we perform a backup for the management center, and now we can see for the um, managed devices. So as said, for managed devices, you have two options. Either we can perform it from the FMC or from the sensor GUI itself. So to perform it from the FMC, we'll have to choose navigate to System Tools, Backup Restore, and we'll have to choose Managed Device Backup. So under Manage Device Backup, you're going to see the list of devices that are supported for backup and restore. For example, if the FMC is going to have multiple sensors registered to it, like 7000, 8000 series devices, FTDs, virtual NGFW devices. So it's going to list you only 7000 and 8000 devices, because those are the devices for which backup and restore is supported. So it will be listing only the devices that are supported here. So this is a 8000 series box here. So it is listing as the information. So here we have an option if you just select it without including the unified files, then it's going to select by default the configuration, and you can also check the unified files option to include the unified files. As said, the unified files are the events information before being processed by the FMC. So in case if you are restoring the device with unified files, the system, the sensors are going to again send the unified files back to the FMC to process the events. So you have another option, retrieve to management center. So as said earlier, when you perform a backup, the backup is going to be stored under var SF backup, which is locally stored on the system. So for management center, for the managed devices here, for the sensors, it's going to store at var SF backup on the sensor itself. When you choose this option, it's going to pull the backup file once done and store it on the FMC as well. So you can use this option for that, and you can store the managed devices. So as said, the other option we have to perform a backup on the sensor are from the local GUI or the GUI of the sensor itself. I said this GUI has only limited options, but yeah, you have the backup and restore option. So the path is going to be similar, which will be to System Tools, Backup and Restore, and here you have to click on Device Backup. So the profile creation is going to be similar on how we saw on the FMC for the FMC backup. So you will have to define the name. You'll have to you can check on email when complete, so that you are notified once it is completed. Then you can choose the required configuration that you want to back it up. So the other option, as we saw, we would be able to perform the backup operation locally on the system, or we can choose to remotely store it. As we know, in case of a system failure, we might lose the information that are stored on the system as well. So it is best to store the backup information on a remote storage, so that even if there's a system failure, we will be able to use that stored backup information in order to restore. So the backup and the remote storage option, we have two different flavors of it. One option is going to be you can choose to copy the backup information once the process is complete. So, but this option gives you only SAP transfer to a different machine, and this is going to be a copy of the existing options. So as you can see, when you check copy when complete, it's going to give you a set of options to fill in, so that you can define the SAP server, the path where it needs to store, and the credentials for the SAP server with the SSH public key. So this is going to be used in order to copy the backup once the backup process is completed on the system. So the other option we have is to set up a remote storage. As you can see, the options available are NFS, SMB, and SSH. So this to configure a remote storage, you will need to go to System Configuration and choose Remote Storage. Also, when you are under System Tools Backup and Restore, if you click on the Remote Storage button, it will navigate you to the same page. So here on the Remote Storage device page, you have to select the type of storage that you want to do. So by default, it's going to be local, which is going to store on the same local system. And when you choose a particular remote storage type, it's going to give you options for that. So here we have given you an example for SMB, and so you have to fill in the details regarding the host name, the share, the credentials. And here we have an option to choose for what we need to use remote storage. So we can use remote storage for backups and reports, and you have an option to choose specifically one to use this remote storage. So when we use remote storage, you can see that the storage location is changed. Earlier, we were able to see that it is stored at a local location, which is var sf backup. But here you can see that whatever we have configured for remote storage, it is giving us that particular path. So I said the difference here between copy when complete and remote storage is like when copy when complete is like it's going to perform the backup and it's going to perform it on the local machine, and once the backup is successful, it is going to copy the created backup to the SCP server that we configure. This is going to be a copy of information. Here it's not going to be a copy, it's going to be directly initializing the backup to the remote server. So you will not find a copy existing on the system. It will be only on the remote server. So once you initialize a backup, you will be able to see the progress of the backup. It will show you different stages in the backup. As an example, as we show here, it will give us what stage it is at. It will like while it is creating the database tables or running the CSM backup. So it's going to show you the progress. So you will in the task window, you will be able to see the backup progress that's happening. So once the backup is completed, if you have chosen the email option, you will be notified once the backup process is complete. And on the backup management page under System Tools Backup Restore, we will be able to see the backup information. As you can see here, it gives the details of the backup, what is the backup for, what device it is, what is the version which the backup was taken, and the timestamp for the backup, and also details for the VDB, where the backup is stored. Is it stored locally or remote, or what is the size of the backup, and if this backup includes events as well. So on the CLI, you should be able to go to the path var/sf backup, and you can also see if the backup file is there. So this is a location where the backup files are stored locally. So as we know, we can initialize a backup on demand, and we have another option on the device to schedule a backup, a recurring backup, or to schedule a one-time backup at a different intervals or at a particular time. So this is going to help us in a maintenance plan, or to have recurring backups is going to help us store backups at a particular interval, say weekly, monthly, daily. We will be able to accordingly schedule these backups. So to schedule a backup, we need to go to the scheduling option. So to go to that, you have to navigate to System Tools Scheduling, where we can click on Add Task to add a particular task. So here, so the scheduling option can be used for multiple things. So in this case, we are focusing on how to perform it for a backup. So we'll have to choose the job type as backup here, because we are going to perform a scheduled backup. So when you perform a scheduled backup, you have to choose if it's going to be a one-time scheduled option or it's going to be a recurring one. So the one-time option is going to, you have to define a starting time when you want to initialize the backup, and once the device is going to initialize it, and once that task is complete, it's going to complete the particular task. It's not going to reoccur. In case if you want to perform a recurring task, you have to choose the recurring option. So when you choose a recurring option, you have to define when do you want to start this recurring process from, and you have to choose the interval. How do you want to take it? You want to take it hourly, daily, weekly, monthly. So you have options to do that, and you want to mention at what time you want to trigger or initialize this backup, and when do you want to perform the backup, at which day, either a particular day when you choose weekly, probably here, and in this example we have chosen a Friday evening. So we'll have to give a name for this particular job, the scheduled job. And I said you can create multiple profiles for backup. For say, for you can have a profile only for configuration. You can have a profile for only events. You can create a different profile for managed devices. You can create a different profile for the complete device. So you can create multiple profiles. You have to choose which particular profile you want to run this scheduled task on, and you can give details or information on what this task is all about, and you can configure your email address as well if you want to be notified once the task is initialized. So once we create the particular task on the task page, the system tool scheduling, we can see that in our example we have scheduled a recurring task that happens every Friday. So we are able to see the particular task added on our scheduled calendar on every Friday. When you click on that particular task, we will be able to see the task details. So if you see at the bottom of the screen, we are able to see the particular task details. It gives us information on what is the job type, when the task is supposed to start, if the task had run anytime earlier, what was the status of the task during the previous instance, and it's going to give you details on where this task is located, who initialized this task. So now we looked at the backup process. How do we carry out a backup and what things that we need to ensure. Now we can look at the restore options. So restoring a backup, as said earlier, we need to ensure that we are restoring it to the correct device. So the device should be the same model for which the backup was taken. We need to ensure the softwares are similar. We need to ensure the VDBSIU versions are the same as the one where we have taken the backup. So to restore the backup, you need to navigate to System Tools, Backup and Restore. And here we can if the backup is not available, we can click on upload backup, choose the backup file, and then click upload backup. Yeah, so on the FMC, the backup management page, we should be able to see the list of available backup options. If we are using local storage, we should see the files available on the local storage. If we have added remote storage, we should also see the backups that are stored on the remote storage as well. So once you see this option, you can click on the particular backup, and then you can initialize to restore the backup to the device. And in case if the backup is going to be huge, so as said earlier, you also have an option to load the backup from the local system and then initialize a backup. But in case if the backup is too huge, say above 4 GB, you will not be able to, due to the browser limitation and restrictions, we will not be able to load the complete backup through the browser, but instead we will have to use the remote storage option here in order to restore a particular backup. So these are certain files where you can look up in case there's an exception or you see there's a backup failure. So the var log message is going to give you all information during a process of a backup and restore, and if there are any exceptions on that, you should be able to see under that. So for particularly for the backup process, you can go to the DB backup, log, which will particularly have a timestamp when you have initialized a particular backup. And to look up restore failures, or if you have any specific exceptions happening during the restore, we will be able to look at the restore backup log or the migration APT files. So this is to list on few common things that we see happen during a backup and restore, and a few options how to mitigate them. So sometimes you will see that the backup restore option is not available. So as said earlier, if you're on a domain management, the backup and restore option is only available on the global domain. So if you're on any subdomains or the leaf domain, we will not be able to see this option. And if the particular user who is trying to perform the backup or restore doesn't have permissions for that backup and restore, maybe he may not be able to see the page as well. So we, in certain cases, or specifically when you have enabled domain management, you will not have a choice to choose between backup or only events. So the backup configuration is going to be mandatory there. So the option will be pre-selected and grayed out. You will not be able to uncheck on a domain management enabled device. So whenever we perform backup on a domain management, the configuration is going to be mandatory, and you can choose either you want to choose the event backup or not. Second, sometimes you will see when you try to restore the backup or you go to the backup management page, the restore option will be grayed out. So when that option is grayed out, it kind of indicates to you that the backup, the restore, the backup file that we have, that we are trying to restore on the target system, the information or the baseline requirements are different there. So either the software doesn't match, or the BDB version doesn't match, or the model of the device doesn't match. So if there is any of these basic requirements are not available, then the device is going to disable the restore option. That's when you will be able to see the restore option grayed out or disabled. Another thing, sometimes there have been instances where we see that after initializing the restore, or after completing the restore, the FMC goes inaccessible. So when the FMC goes inaccessible, there are two conditions where this happens. So since the backup is going to be for a complete system, it's going to restore all the information. So it's going to restore all your user credential information. It's going to restore all your network settings. So once the restore is complete, it's going to change it to the point where the backup was taken. So if you have configured a different network setting, or if you're on a different network setting at the moment connected to the device either by GUI or SSH, once the restore is going to complete, it's going to change that to the one that is available on the backup. So in case there is a change, you might lose access to the device, then probably you might need to reconfigure the network settings. So in these conditions, either you have to be aware of what is the network information that is already there, or you need to have a console or a KVM access in order to reconfigure the network settings post the restore is complete. And again, same thing applies for the user credentials as well. In case you're not aware of the user credentials during the time of the backup, and when after the restore is complete, it might log you out, and if you log in with the default credentials, it may not allow you to log in. You have to use the same credentials updated when the backup was performed. So in that case, either we'll have to again refresh the user tables, or we have to reset the password in order to regain access to the device. So these are certain things that we need to be, we see common that during a backup and restore process, which we need to be aware of. So with this, we kind of come to an end with the backup and restore process. So here are few things that we need to be very much aware of, where we commonly see problems happening because of this. So I said we need to be aware only the FMCs, physical and virtual, and 7000, 8000 series FirePOWER sensors are the only devices that supports backup and restore option. And we have to ensure that we are running the same system model, the system software version, the VDB and SIU versions on the device before we perform a restore. And the backup restore option is available only on the global domain, and we need to have enough space available. If not, the backup during the backup it might fail. And also ensure that you do not use this option when you try to copy the configuration from one appliance to the other. So for this feature only, we will be using the import and export option if we need to copy configurations from one appliance to the other. So with that, we will start with the import export on FirePOWER devices. So this is going to help us to export configuration from one appliance to the other, or export and import it on the same appliance as well, in case if you want to restore the policies. So as said, the backup and restore is not an option to copy the configuration, but import and export is. So if you want to copy configurations between two different appliances, we can export the configuration and then import. Say, for example, you are managing ASA SFR modules from ASDM, and as we know, the SFR module is not participating in the high availability. Only the ASA is. If you're managing it from FMC, you'll be able to push both the configurations, the same policies to both the SFR modules. But if you're managing it locally on ASDM, that is not possible. But to maintain sync or maintain the consistency in configuration, you will be able to use this option where you can configure information on one of the devices and then export the policies and import it on the peer ASA SFR, so that we maintain consistency in the policy import and export. And this cannot be used as a backup tool because it does not take all the information, but it takes only information that's specific to that configuration. It's not going to have all other DBs or the eventing information. Also, here we do not have specific restrictions to the model VDB version and all, but we need to ensure that we are on the same version here, because between version there might be feature set differences. Based on the feature set differences, options available on policies might differ. So we need to ensure that we are running the same software version. In case if we are trying to perform a policy export and import for an intrusion policy, in that case we need to ensure that we are running the same SRU versions as well, because in that case the available rules might differ between different SRUs. So we need to ensure that we are maintaining that requirement as well. So here is a list of policies that are available to export and import from the FMC. So all these options, once you go to the import export option, we'll be able to see the list of all these policies. So which you can select all the policies to export and import, or you can specifically select a particular policy if you want to export and import it on a different device. So there are few things, again, we need to ensure that before performing an import and export. So the very first thing is that the system is going to export all the associated or required configurations when you export a particular policy. For example, say you are when we export an access control policy, there are multiple associated policies or configurations that are mapped to the access control policy. For example, if an access control policy has a particular, say, an intrusion policy mapped to it, when you're going to export the access control policy, the associated intrusion policy is automatically going to be exported along with that. Even though you do not explicitly select the intrusion policy, when you choose to export access control policy, it's going to export the intrusion policies as well. Similar example is for platform settings where you use external authentication. So this external authentication object is also going to be exported when you choose the platform settings to be exported. So there are few exceptions here when we say that it's going to send all the associated policies. So any system downloaded databases of feeds, like say the URL DB that we download or the SI feeds that are downloaded, these are not going to be part of the import export. So these are not exported when we choose to export a particular access control policy. Second, the global security intelligence list. So here, in case if we kind of use specific SI lists, the URL list that we configure, the system is not going to export or import the exact information. It's going to import the information always newly, and we have to explicitly add to the target system. And intrusion policy, as you know, shared has an option of shared layers, and these layers are broken when the intrusion policies are exported. So these layers are not part of the exported configuration. So we'll have to create these layers and mappings again. So another option that that's not carried over automatically or not associated is the variable set. So when we export the package, the package that is exported will by default include the default variable set, any custom variables that we have added to that set, and any variable sets where the user has changed the parameter to a user defined value. So all these information will be available on the exported configuration. But when you import this configuration, the device is going to import all these changes, but it's not going to change anything that's already existing. For example, if on the imported device, if there are other custom variable sets configured on the target system, is not going to do anything to change what is existing on that system. So in a very simple way, it's not going to change or modify that's existing on the target system, but it's just going to append the information that's available. So it's not going to be the exact information that you have changed. It's going to be information that is already available on the device, along with that the information that we have imported. So other things with respect to objects are whenever you when a object or object groups are imported, it's always going to be imported as a new object. So which kind of means that it's not going to replace any object existing on the system. Even if the object, say for example, the imported object, we do find a duplicate object available on the target system, the device is not going to overwrite the option. It's going to append the auto-generated number to that, so that it makes that particular object unique and import it as a new object to the system. And even in import export, the device is not going to allow you or device is not going to take the information of the zone mappings to interfaces. So we'll need to explicitly choose one of the zones which is available when we import it to the device. During import, it's going to give us an option where we can choose an existing zone that's available on the device, or to create a zone and then associate it to the imported policy. So in an import export as well, the private keys are going to be decrypted before the option is exported. So once we import it again, it's going to encrypt it again and then store it on the device. But on an export, the keys are going to be unencrypted. So let's look at the export option on the device. So to export a particular configuration on the FMC GUI, you need to navigate to System, Tools, Import or Export. Here, once you go to the page, you will be listed down with all the available policies, and you have to select a particular policy or a set of policies what you'd like to export. Once you've chosen the set of policies, you have a button on the bottom of the page says export. So once you choose them and click on export, it's going to export the particular policy. So as you can see here, once you expand the option, it's going to list down the set of policies available under that category. So in this case here, we have access control policies. If you've chosen a particular policy, click on export, and we can see a .sfo file that's downloaded. So this will be the exported policy from this particular device. So we have looked at how to export the information. So when we import the information, again, there are few more things, because on the imported device, there could be existing configuration, similar configuration. So depending on that, what we need to do is going to differ. So to import a configuration, again, we need to ensure that we are running the same system, the software version on the device. The model of the device can be different, but the software version should be same. And in case for access control where we have like intrusion policies associated, in that case we need to ensure that we are running the same SRU, the rule update version, on the device. So to perform an import, you need to navigate to System, Tools, Import, Export. Click on Upload Package option, and once you click on the upload option, you have to choose the .sfo file, the exported policies, in order to import. So once you click on this option, it is going to do a pre-check on like the version information, so the basic compatibility, and then it's going to list you the available policies on that particular the file that you're trying to import. And with that, you can either choose selected policies to import, or you can choose all policies to import. So here is an example on the same thing I've explained. So you'll have to navigate to System, Tools, Import, Export, and you will be given an option to browse and choose a particular .sfo file, which is the exported policy information. Once you choose that information, it's going to list you down the list of policies that are available on that SFO file. So in this case, in this example, we had only one policy, so it's giving us only one option. In case if you have more than one policy exported, you're going to see all those policies listed. And again, in another case, say for example, you have exported an access control policy, and in that access control policy, we have an IPS policy, intrusion policy associated to that. Then, as said earlier, the system is going to automatically include that the associated intrusion policy also to the exported file. So if you export such a exported file to the system, it's going to give you the intrusion policy also is going to be listed along with the access control policy. You can choose a particular policy from the listed options to import it to the device. So when you click on import, it's going to initialize a particular task. You'll be able to see a notification that the import task is scheduled, and the task will run in the background. So in this case, it is a successful message. As you can see that the imported policy is imported to the system, and we are able to see the imported policy to this system here. So in case if there is a issue that you are able to see, if the system is not going to find any compatibility issues, it's going to immediately throw you an error before even it gives you the import option. As soon as you click on the particular policy import, before it lists down the available policies on the exported file, it's going to give you an exception saying that there's some mismatch and we need to address it. In this case, is an example where we are trying to import a policy on a newer version, but when the policy is from an older package. Also, if say this is a compatibility issue with the device, but say if there are conflicts arising when you kind of import it. Say you have similar policy existing on the system, or you have any duplicate entries. So in that kind of case, it's going to give you a import conflict resolution page where you will have to define what action you're going to take for that. So as said, this is going to be explaining on that conflict resolution page on what action you have to perform on that. So I think George will continue on this.
Thank you, Prasad. Hi everyone, this is George Varghese with Cisco Security TAC. I'll be taking over this session from my colleague Prasad.
George, any trouble sharing your screen?
Yeah, I'm having a little trouble with the PPT and sharing the PPT. Give me a
Okay.
minute. Hi everyone, sorry for the minor interrupt. So I'll be continuing on the session that has been discussed by my colleague Prasad. So I will take from the topic import export conflict resolution. So when we are importing a policy to the FirePOWER Management Center, there is a chance that the policy name or the type might conflict with any of the existing policies on the device. So during the time of import, the system will run a background check to see if the policy name or type that we are trying to import conflict with any of the existing policy names or types on the system. And also if the policy that we are trying to import is referencing to any security zone that are not on the device, then the system will present us with a import conflict resolution page, as you can see here. So in this page, it will provide us with the option how to handle the situations where there exists a conflict or duplicate name or type with the policy we are trying to import and the policies that exist on the device. So here, for example, if the policy is referencing to any security zone that is not available on the device, then the conflict resolution page will give us an option to choose any of the existing security zone available on the device. For example, in this case, you can see in the backend screenshot the security zone passive. So we can either use this security zone or we can create a new security zone. So for importing policies, the import conflict resolution page will present us with this option: keep existing, replace existing, keep newest, or import as new. So as you can see in the screenshot, this page will be presented to us by the conflict resolution, and we can choose any of these 4 options. And if we choose the keep existing option, you can see a notification showing that nothing is imported. This is because the system choose to keep the original policy on the system that was conflicting with the policy we are trying to import, and it will not import that policy. On the other hand, if we select the option replace existing or keep newest, then the system will import the policy and it will replace the existing policy on the system with this new policy. And also if we select the option import as new, what the system does is it will keep the original policy with the original name and type, but it will also import the new policy and it will append a system generated number to the name of the policy so that it will be imported as unique and will not conflict with the existing policies on the device. If the access control policy we are trying to import contain any associated objects, then the system will automatically import these objects as new objects to the device, and these objects will not be listed in the conflict resolution page. And if the policy contains any dependent policies or associated policies such as DNS policy, SSL policy, network analysis policy, malware or identity policy, and any realm policies, then we will not get any option to import them individually. Instead, the system will be importing these dependent policies as part of the access control policy we are trying to import. For access control policy with hierarchical configuration, if this configuration or policy is conflicting with any of the duplicate name or type that exists on the device, then the import conflict resolution page will only give us the option to import these access control policies as new. Again, for associated or dependent policies such as SSL or intrusion policy, even if we select the option keep existing or replace in the conflict resolution page, these associated policies will always be imported as new. This is because there could be other dependent or associated policies that exist on the device with duplicate or identical name and type to these associated policies, and replacing them is not ideal because they might be used by some other access control policies on the device. Also, if the access control policy contains security intelligence configuration that use any URL, DNS and IP list, then this list will always be imported as new to the device. This is again because of the same reason as discussed above, because we do not want to replace any of these lists that exist on the device, as it could be used by some other dependent policies. When we are trying to import a policy into a multi-tenant domain or into a system that contains ancestor or descendant domains, then the option presented to us in the import conflict resolution page entirely depends on to which domain we are trying to import this policy. For example, if we are trying to import the access control policy and its associated dependent policies to the current domain, then the import conflict resolution page will present us with the option keep existing, replace existing, keep newest and import as new. Whereas if we are trying to import the access control policy to the ancestor domain or descendant domain, then it will only give us the option keep existing and import as new. This is because the current domain will not have much view or awareness about the ancestor or descendant domain. Therefore, replacing the dependent policies or access control policies that are part of the ancestor or descendant domain is not ideal. If the access control policy we are trying to import contain any associated file policy, and if the file policy is using any clean or custom file list, then the options presented to us in the import conflict resolution page will be similar to what we have seen before, but the actions taken would be a little different. So if the import conflict resolution page presents us with the option and we choose the option replace existing or import as new, or the option keep newest with access control policy being imported as the newest, then what the system does is it will import the access control policy along with the associated file policy and its file list, and this file list will be merged with the file list that existing on the device after the import. Whereas if we choose to go with the option keep existing or keep newest with existing access control policy is the newest, then the system will not import the new policy or file list. Instead, it will keep the existing access control policy, associated file policy and file list as unchanged on the system. Now we'll go through the highlighted topics that we discussed in this session. So first is that for any dependent policies or associated policy that is associated with the master access control policies, they will always be imported as new. So even in the conflict resolution page, if we do not select these dependent policies individually, still the system will automatically import them as new policies. Also, we have to be careful about the software version. So the device from which the configuration has been exported should be running the same version, same software version as the device on which we are trying to import the access control policy. If there is a software mismatch between the two devices, then the policy import will fail. Also, if the access control policy we are trying to import contains any associated intrusion policy with it, then the SRE rule update should also match on both the devices. Whenever we are importing hierarchical access control policies, the system will always automatically import them as new policies. Another thing to keep in mind is that whenever the access control policy being imported is referencing any security zone, it will never override the existing security zone on the device. Instead, while importing the configuration or the policy, the import conflict resolution page will give us the option either to choose an existing security zone on the device or to create a new security zone. With that, we have come to a conclusion with the import-export configuration and the conflict resolution. Now we will jump into the topic ASA to FTD migration. So the contents we will be discussing under these topics are when to use the migration tool and the basic architecture and configuration of the migration tool, the features supported for migration by the migration tool, and also we will take a look at some of the basic troubleshooting steps and logs that we can look in case of migration failure, and also the best practices that we have to keep in mind. With the introduction of FTD or FirePOWER Threat Defense device into the market, it has brought along a big challenge of efficiently converting the existing ASA configuration to the FirePOWER Threat Defense configuration. For this, Cisco came up with an implementation or feature called ASA to FTD migration tool. The migration tool helps us in converting specific ASA configuration to equivalent FirePOWER Threat Defense configuration. Once this configuration has been completely migrated, if we want to make any additional configuration and tuning, it is recommended to do them after importing this migrated configuration to the working FirePOWER Management Center device. After importing this configuration to the Management Center, this configuration can be applied to any of the FTD devices, including FTD running on 9300, 2100 or 4100 chassis, along with ASA devices that are migrated as or reimaged as FTD. The migration tool is nothing but a FirePOWER Management Center which has an extended feature for migration. The migration tool requires a dedicated instance of FirePOWER Management Center because the migration tool can only run the migration task and it cannot run any other process. We can also use an OVF image for VMware to be used as the migration tool. Any FirePOWER Management Center software with software version 6.2.0 or above have an inbuilt script for converting it into a migration tool. Now we will take a look into the installation part of the migration tool. We can download the FirePOWER Management Center software image from the support site, and once the software image is downloaded, we can deploy it on the device, or if we are using a VMware, then we can deploy it on the ESXi. Only make sure that the image is at least 6.2.0 or above version. Once the image is deployed, then we can get into the root shell of the CLI using the command sudo su, and we can run the inbuilt script enable migration tool.pl. So once this script is run, then it will convert the FirePOWER Management Center into a migration tool. So once the script has efficiently converted the FirePOWER Management Center to the migration tool, then we can log into the device GUI and it will present us with a screen like this, which says migration tool installed, you are limited to ASA conversions only. If we see this screen, then it means that the migration tool is ready to use. Now we will take a look into the basic architecture outline of the migration tool and the process. For converting ASA configurations, first we need to check the ASA configuration and take it from the ASA which we want to migrate. We have to make sure that the configuration file taken from the ASA is either in .cfg or .txt format. The migration tool uses the policy import export feature of the FirePOWER Management Center for the migration process. So once we have the configuration file from ASA in .cfg or .txt format, then we can feed it to the migration tool using the policy import feature. So here is an architecture diagram for the process. As you can see in the diagram, the migration tool will take the ASA configuration file from in .cfg or .txt format, which can be uploaded into the migration tool using the policy import functionality which was discussed earlier. So once the ASA configuration file has been imported into the migration tool, then the migration tool will run the migration process. So there is an internal process in the migration tool called CSM, which will be taking this migration file validates the configuration and convert it into equivalent FirePOWER threat defense configuration. So once the migration is done, you will get the migrated configuration in .sfo format, which can be downloaded from the migration tool along with a report on the migration. This migrated configuration in .sfo format can then be imported into a FirePOWER management center that is running in the production network using the same policy import feature. Once this configuration has been imported into the FirePOWER management center, it can be edited, viewed, and applied to any of the managed FTD devices that are registered on that FirePOWER management center. Now we will talk a little about the migration report. So migration report basically presents us with a summary of the migration. So if there are any configuration in the ASA configuration file which are not supported for the migration, then those will be listed in the migration report. Also, if there is any configuration that the migration tool could not convert, but even though it was supported configuration, that also will be listed in the migration report. So these configurations can be added later to the FirePOWER management center once the migrated configuration has been successfully imported into the FMC. Now we will take a look at the configuration part. Once we have the migration tool up and running, we can log into the GUI and navigate to the option System Tools Import Export. Once we go to the option, we can click on the tab Upload Package to upload the ASA configuration file which we have on our system in .cfg or .txt format. Once we have chosen the file and click on Upload, it will redirect us to a new page called Migration Options. So before going into that page, we'll talk a little about what the migration option refers to. So the migration option gives us two alternate ways to migrate the ASA configuration into the FirePOWER Threat Defense configuration. We can either convert this configuration as a pre-filter policy on the FirePOWER Threat Defense or as an access control policy. Pre-filter policy is like the first phase of inspection before traffic is inspected by the much deeper inspection or resource utilizing inspection by the access control policy such as file inspection or intrusion inspection, etc. So we basically use pre-filter policy if we want to exclude or bypass any specific traffic from this overutilization of inspection by the access control policy. And also if we want to inspect any tunnel traffic, we can specify that under pre-filter policy. So pre-filter policy is basically a light-headed inspection because it will only look into the outer header of the traffic for taking actions. So there is two actions that we can configure for the pre-filter policy under the migration options that are either fastpath or analyze. If we choose the option fastpath, then the traffic specified in the pre-filter policy will be bypassed or excluded from further inspection by the pre-filter policy or the access control policy. If we choose to go with the option analyze, then those traffic which match against this pre-filter policy will be subjected to deeper inspection by the access control policy. The access control policy, on the other hand, is a master policy which determines how the traffic should be handled by the device. So this access control policy will contain a set of dependent policies such as intrusion policy or malware and file policies or app-based filtering, URL filtering, etc., using which we can efficiently filter and regulate our traffic. So if we choose to go with the option access control policy, then the system will give us two options, either trust or allow. So with the trust option, the traffic will be bypassed from any of the dependent policy inspection within the access control policy, and with the action allow, then the traffic will be subjected to the dependent policy inspection that comes under the access control policy, such as file inspection and intrusion inspection. So here you can see a screenshot of the migration options page. So once we have selected the migration option we want to go with, either pre-filter policy or access control policy, and the associated action along with it, we can click on the OK button. Once we click on the OK button, the CSM process that is running on the background will start the migration process, and it might take some time for the task to get reflected under the task status, but once the migration process has started, we can see the task under the taskbar. So here you can monitor the progress of the migration, and also once the migration is completed, you can download the migrated file in SFO format along with the migration report from under this taskbar. Now we will discuss on the device requirements, specifically the ASA device requirements from which we take the ASA configuration file, as well as the FirePOWER requirement for importing this migrated file to the FirePOWER system. So for ASA device requirements, the ASA configuration file can be taken from any ASA platform that is running software code 9.1 and above. Also, we have to keep in mind that the ASA configuration file should be taken from an ASA which is always running in single context mode. The migration tool will not support configuration file from ASA which is running in multi-context mode. If the configuration file is to be taken from an ASA which is in active standby failover, then the configuration should always be taken from the active unit in the failover. Also, if the ASA is part of a cluster, then the configuration file has to be taken from the master unit. The migration tool will support the ASA configuration file irrespective of whether the ASA is running in transparent or routed mode. Now we will discuss on the FirePOWER device requirements. So as discussed earlier, we need separate instance of FirePOWER Management Center in the production network and a separate dedicated instance for running the migration tool. The FirePOWER Management Center listed here will support the migrated configuration file provided by the migration tool. Also keep in mind that for applying this migrated configuration from the FMC to the FTD should be in a compatible version with the FMC and should already be registered to the FMC. And also the migration tool from which we migrated the ASA configuration into the equivalent FirePOWER threat defense configuration should be running the same software version as the production FMC on which we are planning to import this migrated configuration. The migration tool will not convert any of the ASA license. This is because the license used by the FirePOWER threat defense device is entirely different from the license used by the ASA. And also for using the migrated configuration on a FirePOWER management center system, the management center must be having at least the base FirePOWER threat defense license. Now we will take a look onto the different features that are supported for migration. The migration tool will support extended access list and also twice NAT and object NAT rules for migration. If the ASA configuration file contains any standard access list or any NAT rules that is other than twice NAT and network object NAT rules, those will not be migrated by the migration tool. Also, if the configuration contains any network objects or object groups, service objects or object groups which are not associated with any actively used access control rule or NAT rule, then the migration tool will not convert them. And if another thing to keep in mind is that the migration tool will only convert ASA configuration. If you have a ASA device that is running FirePOWER service on it as a module, then the migration tool will not convert the ASA FirePOWER configuration. If you want to convert the ASA FirePOWER configuration to the FirePOWER threat defense configuration, then you have to manually add those rules after the ASA configuration has been successfully converted into the FirePOWER threat defense configuration, and this configuration file in SFO format has been imported into the FirePOWER Management Center. Also, the migration tool has a limitation for the number of access control elements it can convert. The migration tool will support up to 2 million access control elements. If the ASA configuration file contains more access control elements than this, then the migration tool will fail to convert them, and it can lead to a migration failure. You can run the command show access list pipe include elements on the ASA CLI to see the access control elements associated with an access control rule. But it is always better to check for the total sum of access control elements in the ASA configuration file rather than checking individual access control rules. Also, as discussed before, the network objects or any service objects that is used under the ASA configuration file should be associated with an access control rule or a NAT rule, and also the access control rules and NAT configuration rules contained in the ASA configuration file should be associated with an interface. Otherwise, the migration tool will fail to migrate them. There are certain parameters in the ASA configuration file within the access control list and NAT configuration rules that are unsupported by the migration tool. This include time range objects, fully qualified domain names, local users or user groups, security group objects, nested service groups for both source and destination ports, and also egress access list as well. So if the ASA configuration file we are trying to migrate contains any of these unsupported parameters, then the migration tool will not understand them and it will fail to convert them. So in that case, the migration tool will partially convert the configuration. When I say partially convert the configuration, it means that if the rule contains parameters such as source or destination IP address, source port or destination port that the migration tool understands, then the migration tool will convert them. Whereas if it contains any of these unsupported parameters such as, for example, time range objects, then it will not be converted by the migration tool, and that rule altogether will be disabled in the migrated configuration file. And also the migration tool will append a keyword unsupported to this disabled rules in the configuration file, and also it will add a command line to this rule saying why it was disabled. So once the migrated configuration file has been imported into the FirePOWER Management Center system, you can either replace these rules or edit and modify them. If the ASA configuration file contains any either type of or web type access list or access control elements that use host address using the name command in the ASA configuration, or if it contains any predefined service objects, then the migration tool will exclude this configuration from the migration. In case of predefined service objects, we can manually edit the ASA configuration file and replace this predefined service objects with custom ports. The conversion mapping table gives us an idea on how the migration tool converts each of the ASA configurations into equivalent FirePOWER threat defense configuration. For network objects such as network objects, network object groups, nested network object groups, the FirePOWER threat defense have equivalent configuration so that the migration tool will convert them as such. But when it comes to service objects, the migration tool will convert them as port objects, and for service object groups, it will be converted as port object groups, and nested service object groups will be converted as flattened port object groups. For access control rules in the ASA configuration file, it will be converted either into access control policy rule or pre-filter policy rule depending upon the option we select under the migration option. With NAT rule, the migration tool will migrate or convert twice NAT rule as manual NAT rules, and network object NAT rules will be converted as auto NAT rule in the migrated configuration file. With that, we have come to an end with the limitation and configuration part of the ASA to FTD migration tool. Now we will take a look into the basic troubleshooting steps that we can follow to troubleshoot migration failures. First, we will take a look into whatever logs we can check to see why the migration has failed. So as you can see in the table, the mojo.log is a helpful log as it will show as the steps where the migration start and the generation of the SFO file. So if the migration even fails to start, then you can see it in the mojo.log, or if the migration failed, you can see at what stage it failed, or if it failed to generate the SFO file, you can see that also in the mojo.log. When it comes to troubleshooting migration failure, the most helpful log is the VMS shared SVCS log. This log is located under the directory opt cs.px mdc log operation. So this log is the most helpful log because it will point us to the exact line or error message which is relating to the migration failure. Another log to check is the VMS DESVCS log. This log will give us any errors if there is any issue while the system parses the ASA configuration. Another log to check is the USM shared SVCS logs. So if there is any issue happening in the migration tool backend, like for example, if the CSM process which is responsible for the migration activity has some issues syncing up with other backend process running on the system, then those errors will be listed under this logs. ActionQ.log, as always, is the basic log to check for the running task. So once the migration process starts to run, you can keep track of the task under the ActionQ.log. So as you can see in the example logs provided here, it will show us when the migration task has started, and once the migration task has finished, you can see that also here, and it will also show us that the SFO file has been generated. So from this ActionQ.log, we can start our troubleshooting, and it will also give us the timestamp and date, so that it is very helpful in correlating the time when the migration failed to check in other logs as well. Now we'll discuss on some of the common problems that occur during the migration. If the ASA configuration file contains any incomplete or partial configuration, then the migration tool will fail to migrate it. And also the configuration inside the ASA, the configuration file taken from the ASA should be in the exact same format as we see under the show running configuration on the ASA. If the ASA configuration file contains access lists that are applied to multiple interfaces on the ASA, this access list will be migrated as separate access control policy rule or pre-filter policy rules. A common problem that we see during the migration is that if the configuration file we taken from the ASA is missing the version string towards the beginning of the configuration, then the migration tool will fail to recognize it as a valid ASA configuration, and it will throw us an error, as you can see in the screen, where it says that invalid ASA configuration file, please pass a valid file. If the configuration file contains any predefined service objects, then the migration tool will fail to convert them. In that case, we can manually edit or modify the ASA configuration file and replace those predefined service objects with custom ports. Another common issue seen is that once you are in the migration options page and you have chosen the migration option, either pre-filter policy or access control policy, and when you click on the OK button, then the migration process will start, but it might take some time for the migration process to reflect under the task button. So if you keep pressing on the OK button, then that can leave the system in an unclean state. So once the system goes into an unclean state, then there will be an associated domain that created on this device called the MIG domain, which will be where the migration activity will be running. So this is a temporary domain, and if the system gets into an unclean state, then this temporary domain will get hung, and we will have to delete it manually from the CLI to retain the migration tool functionality or to continue with the migration. Now we'll take a look into a couple of examples with troubleshooting migration failure. there are some situations where the migration process will complete successfully, but it will fail to generate an SFO file. So in that case, if you check under the taskbar, there will be no SFO file generated, but there will be a migration report. And if you click on the migration report, it will show a usual report template with the timestamp and all. And under summary, you can see that there are no policies migrated. So this situation is little difficult to troubleshoot because in actionqueue.log or any other logs, there won't be any failure or error messages because the migration process did not fail. But if we take a deep look into the VMS shared SVCS logs, you can see similar logs like this saying cannot find replacement or does not have entry in the map. So if you see logs like this, then it indicates that the configuration file we have from the ASA has incomplete or partial configuration. So this kind of situation usually happen if the ASA configuration file contain access control list, but there is no access group command to map this access control list to any interface. Or for example, there are objects or service objects or network objects which are not mapped to any NAT rules or access control rules. Most of the times you will see that the migration will fail due to some error in the ASA configuration or due to some part of the ASA configuration which is not supported by the migration tool. In that case also, the VSM shared SVCS logs is very helpful in pointing us to the exact line of the ASA configuration where the migration was failing. So if we check this logs, you can see that it is pointing us to the error with the line invalid port value VXLAN. This is because the migration tool does not support VXLAN port. So in this case, we can, once we know that this is what causing the migration to fail, then we can modify the ASA configuration file and replace this VXLAN port with any custom port. Another example here where the VSM shared logs is pointing us to an error in the configuration with the line pim all checksum. So this is because this is an ASA specific command line and this is not supported on the FirePOWER threat defense. So you can remove this specific command line from the ASA configuration and that will fix the issue. With that, we have concluded the troubleshooting steps. Now we will take a look into the best practices and some of the checklists that we can keep in mind before starting the migration process so that we can avoid most of the common problems that occur with the migration. First thing to make sure is that the ASA device from which we are taking the configuration file meets all the necessary requirements as we have discussed in this topic. Also, the ASA configuration file should be either in .cfg format or .txt format. Also make sure that the access control, the ASA configuration file does not contain any access control elements that is exceeding the predefined limit. Also, it would be a better practice to go through the ASA configuration at least once before feeding it into the migration tool to make sure that it does not contain any invalid configuration or configuration that are not supported for migration by the migration tool. And another thing to keep in mind is that the migration tool we are using should be running the same software version as the device onto which we are planning to import the migrated configuration. If there is a software version mismatch between the migration tool and the FirePOWER Management Center in the production network on which we are trying to import the migrated configuration, then the policy import will fail. When we are importing the migrated configuration file in .sfo format into the FirePOWER Management Center in the production network, the import process is very much similar to the policy import feature that we have discussed earlier in this session. So similarly, the FirePOWER Management Center will present us with a conflict resolution page while importing the policy, and there we have to keep in mind that we use appropriate security zones to replace those referenced in the migrated configuration. And also, once the migrated configuration has been successfully imported into the FirePOWER Management Center, make sure that the security zones are associated with correct interfaces on the device before applying the configuration onto the device. With that, we have concluded our session for today with the SA to FTD migration. Thank you.
Thanks, George. Now Navneet will take over to introduce the Black Belt program for partners.
Yeah, thank
Navneet,
you.
over to you. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Can you make me the presenter?
Okay. Yeah. You're the presenter now.
Hello, everyone. My name is Navneet, and I'm a partner SE. I work in APJ enablement team for partners. And in this quarter, starting from this month, we have introduced security black belt framework, which is a framework wherein we are enabling partners in the whole security portfolio. Basically, we are going to enable partners in pre-sales, deployment, and support. So the kind of training we are going through it. So I would just like to present to you this program. It will take 10 minutes, and I would really appreciate your time here. So the biggest challenge we've had with security solutions is that that the convergence is not fast. So let's say Cisco has taken over a new technology in Cisco in security, then there is the convergence is was not there. So we are trying our best to converge all those technologies within this framework as soon as possible. It will be closely aligned with the FireJumper program, which means FireJumper program is a program which works with enabling partners in selling security solutions. So it will be closely aligned to that program. Trainings will be in the form of classroom training and webinar. So the training we are going through it right now, it's a webinar for FTD. So that will be the training format. And for clearing each training, an individual will be rewarded with Cisco rewards, and a certificate will be awarded. We are going to get into the details shortly. So let's go through the structure of the Black Belt program, what it is and what all it covers. So currently our security is divided in 4 different technologies: network security, visibility and enforcement, advanced threat, cloud and content security. And in this program, there will be 2 levels as of now, and we'll get into each level shortly. So the pre-sales part, as I said, I'm not sure if everyone is familiar with FireJumper program, but pre-sales part is taken care of FireJumper program. So if you are not familiar with, just go through our website and search for security solutions, and then you should be able to find that. So in deployment, we are currently going to have 2 levels. Level 1 where is the one wherein we are going to talk about all the new features and updates a particular technology or product has, and in how many ways can we deploy the product. There will be a verification which is done by cold test, and based on that an individual will be rewarded. For level 2, this is specifically for engineers who deploy a solution to a customer premises. So we will get a confirmation from our partners management that they have deployed a solution. We would need certain details. Based on that, we will certify an individual in deployment. Then there's the support levels. So support level 1 is where we are going to deliver webinars on software and support, basic troubleshooting and TAC best practices. This is so FTD training which is conducted right now is going to be a part of support level 1. So once the 4 sessions are over, you guys will be given a cold test which you have to clear, and based on that you will be given a certification and a reward for clearing the level 1 for support. Now product level 2 is a product specific training which will be classroom training. So let's say if there is a need of FirePOWER or FTD classroom trainings, we are going to conduct those trainings on specific classrooms on specific products, and this will be these sessions will be judged based on how good are you at in troubleshooting those scenarios, and you will be awarded as a product SME certifications. Now, these are the recognitions we have. So once you clear both levels in deployment, you will be a deployment certified. For level 1, it will be a support certified, which is going to be a part of this, or this training is going to be a part of level 1. And then it will be a product certified, product SME certification in this program. So obviously there are some requirements and compliances which everyone has to follow if they are going to undergo any training within the Black Belt framework. So for each training, we expect for deployment and support, we expect everyone to have basic CCNA level understanding, and mandatory compliances will be, or they can be a fire jumper certified, and mandatory compliances will be that they should clear all the cold tests, and in deployment they should deploy a solution which is in level 2. And apart from that, they should be able to clear all the lab recreates, which is going to be a part of level 2 support. Let's go to rewards. So these are the rewards which will be providing to our partners. So this will be specifically for partner engineers who will clear the test. It will not go directly to your partner companies. So for anyone who is clearing level 1 in deployment, it's $100. Level 2 is $400. For support, again, it's $100 and $400. So once you clear all the cold tests, so cold test will have around 20 questions at one point of time, and you have around 5 times you can give that exam, and once you clear that, you will be awarded with a Black Belt Support Level 1 certificate and $100 reward points. This is the certificate that we will be giving out to our partner engineers. And in case you have any questions about this program or anything related to Black Belt, you can, about trainings, you can email us at blackbelt-security@cisco.com, and we will be happy to answer all the queries. Thank you for now. And Rajesh?
Thank you, Navneet. I believe we didn't have any open questions. Let's open the session for live Q&A now.
Sure.
As usual, you can post your questions in the Q&A panel, or you can also use the raise hand option, and I can unmute you to speak out with your question. Thank you. Team, we have a question from Vishnu. Can someone take that up? You can also answer it verbally.
Hey guys, so I just saw the question here for that the 2.2 version has both the OVF and the ISO. So both of these formats are understood by the workstation. They are supposed to understand it, but OVF was specifically, it is basically a configuration file of all your setup that you have, and you just import it as an open virtual format. So it's something that the ESXi understands better than a workstation. But when you're installing it on the workstation, I would say do it with the ISO so that you can decide on whatever hardware specifications you want, and you just have to then load it from the ISO and install it. So the ISO doesn't give many problems on the workstation. You can use both methods, but the ISO on the workstation is probably what we have seen working more than the OVF.
Okay, Navneet Prasad, hope all the questions has been answered. I don't see anything coming new. Is there anything that you'd like to add, or we can wrap up the session? Avinash?
I think we're good. I don't see any more new questions, so I think it should be good.
Okay. Okay, perfect. Thank you all, and thanks again everyone for attending today's session. Once you end the session, a short survey will automatically pop up on your screen. We appreciate if you could spare a minute and fill out the short survey to let us know about your experience. Thanks again and have a good day ahead. Bye everyone.